One church is using AI for confessions. Meanwhile, Pope Francis says priests should not be using AI for their homilies. Is artificial intelligence in the confessional booth? This isn't just about technology. It raises deeper issues about the culture. If people are asking AI for advice and opinions, are we slowly replacing human and spiritual guidance for machines? And if that's happening, what does it say about how we really understand reality itself? What is reality? Welcome to Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of ideas. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and we need your support. The algorithms are pushing divisive content while hiding serious discussion. Please become a fellow adventurer on Patreon and support this channel's mission of encouraging discussion, not division. The link is in the description. So, Larissa, I read a couple of news reports recently. One of them was a church in Switzerland was using AI for its confessional booth. And then another one was Pope Francis was telling priests not to use AI. So what's going on here?
Well, I think what we're seeing is something that's part of a larger issue. On the one hand, religion is a relationship with God. That's the purpose of religion, is to have that human relationship with God. So when you bring in anything artificial, you basically take the humanity out of it and therefore defeat the purpose of religion. You can't substitute humanity with artificial anything. That's why it's called artificial. You know, you could have an artificial plant or you can have a real plant, and there is a difference. There is a massive difference. I don't care how good the artificial plant looks. I don't care how much perfume you put on your artificial plant. It can never be a real plant. Same thing with AI. You cannot have anything artificial become real. I don't care how much it looks and feels and smells like the real thing. It is, by definition, artificial. And so when the Pope is saying that priests shouldn't use AI for homilies, it's because you can't put something artificial into the real life. You can't take that humanity out of religion, because then it's not religion. It's something else, artificial religion. We'll call it AR, which I know, augmented reality, but but again, this is part of a larger issue, right? When my children were young, I bought them Echo Dots, and this was because I wanted them to have music to fall asleep to, and I would set it to like a classical music that they could just kind of fall asleep to at night, and then it would have an alarm clock for them in the morning. So I could buy this, and it was like on sale, so it was cheaper than any sort of other mechanism I could get that would do that function for me. So I bought them little Echo Dots. And within 6 months, they started talking to it like it was a real thing. And I had to teach them that, and we call it She Who Cannot Be Named, because, you know, you say her name and then suddenly she's listening and you don't want her to. So we'd say, She Who Cannot Be Named is not a real person. You can't talk to her like a real person. And it took a long time for them to understand that. That was a real lesson that they had to learn. And now I see all of these commercials about, you know, what you can do with AI and technology. And, you know, even Ryan George last week put out a video about having AI write an email to his boss, and, you know, great tongue in cheek of how bad it can go. But this idea that it can replace us as humans is very scary, because I think people are confusing what's real with what's fake. Because like the fake flower, it looks and it smells like a flower, but it's still a fake flower. And if people don't understand the difference between reality and technology, I think we're in for a very rude awakening.
Well, yeah, this is not really just a new problem with AI. You can go back to our view of reality is shaped by our experiences. And you go back far enough, you start finding people are writing down experiences that never happened, and we call them books and novels. stories. And, if you immerse yourself into like, Dungeons and Dragons type stories, mythologies, or fantasy, it begins to affect how you think. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that if you do a little bit of it, it's sort of harmless. But if you read a lot, it can begin to shape who you are, and you see this in books, and then you see this in movies, where our view of reality, since it's a visual presentation, uh, eh, we actually see people, and we begin to confuse the characters in the movies with real people. And you talk to people, they're reading a book, and an important character dies, and they cry. They feel sadness. Why? Because, there's a confusion going on with reality, and then you move into the TV age where instead of these alternate realities we consume on an offhand basis, we started consuming more frequently, and then you move into the internet age and now the cell phones and the total connectivity and, particularly with VR, and you begin that blurring that was somewhat existent before is now becoming very real. And, they've done studies on this. There's a study where they surveyed women's views of love and found a very strong correlation between various opinions about love and various types of media these women consumed. And so, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. Are they consuming that media because they have those notions of love, or are their view of reality being shaped by what they see on the screen? Because they see characters, and it's sort of like the whole thing about lawyers were complaining that they can't get a guilty conviction because someone was watching Perry Mason, and the guilty person always confesses at the end of the show, and since the person didn't confess, they must have been innocent. Whether that's mythical or not, that typifies the view of reality that people begin to shape. They see things happen in the movies so much that they begin to think they're actually real, and it affects how they look at the world itself.
Well, yeah, and you see this, the nice thing about these kinds of mediums, right, is they get to the point where they start showing you a little bit of real life in it. So you see movies and TV shows and books where one of the characters is famous, and then something bad happens because someone assumes that they are, like, for an actor, for example, they assume that the actor is the character and not a person. And so if you act like a bad guy, people are going to say, oh, you're a bad guy, and they're going to be scared of you, even if you're the nicest person in the world. Because they can't separate the actor from the character that they play.
Yeah, the whole concept of we blur reality and fiction together because we consume so much media that we don't really, you have a whole generation now growing up on their cell phones who you could argue their reality is more the artificial reality they see in their cell phones than the reality of the people. Their their whole view of life is, what they see on TikTok or the videos they watch. They don't consume a lot of other, they don't actually go out and talk to people and find out what's going on. They're on their phones getting this artificial view of what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, and there's this expectation if you are posting online. So you're an influencer or a podcaster or someone with some sort of online presence, that what you post online has to be a perfect version of your reality of who you are, which ends up by definition making it fake and unreal. And you see that where there's now a trend of videos that show that these influencers are lying and these people aren't who they say they are. And I think it sets up bad expectations because you have people who are literally going through traumatic facial reconstruction and body reconstruction surgeries in order to look like some filter that you have on your phone. And when your view of reality is so skewed that you're willing to put your body through extreme pain to make reality fit what you think reality should be, again, it's very scary.
Yeah, it's not a new problem. You see this with people who are anorexic or have some other disorders, or their view of reality doesn't match the real world, and so their view of reality is they're overweight and they need to stop eating. In reality, they're starving themselves to death, and this mismatch between reality and their view of reality is, in that case, extremely harmful. And we, to some extent, we all suffer from this. We all have our views of reality, and we all have we have opinions about, which TV shows are the best, which politicians we like, who's good, who's bad. Uh, and they're all at their core go back to a view of reality that has been molded over the years as we grew up and matured. But if that reality is now an artificial one created by AI, then what's that going to be? What's that feedback loop going to end up generating? And some respects, life is hard. One of the summaries of philosophy of life I've heard once was, life is suffering and then you die, which is not a very rosy way of looking at things. But through human history, it's actually probably the more correct view of history. Life is very hard, and we suffer, and it's not easy to negotiate through life. One of my favorite sayings is, "Life is life is what happens while you're making plans." And if you have a view of life that's artificially shaped, not reality, then that difference between your view and reality will come crashing in at some point.
About 15, 20 years ago, my ex-husband and I, we hosted exchange students and we were support coordinators. And part of that responsibility was when the students would come in at the beginning of the school year, and we dealt with high school students, we would get them all in a group and we would kind of talk to them about American culture and some of the things that are a little bit different, like the fact that you can't just expect to hop on a bus and go wherever you want. The fact that America is so much larger than you could possibly imagine. And going from one state usually, or can most times, take longer than it would take for you to drive across Europe. So it was kind of trying to set expectations. But one of the things we would do, one of the activities we would do with them, is we would have them sit down and we'd have them talk about what they expected of their year here in America and what their expectations were. And one of the things we tried to warn them about is that those of you who have very high expectations of what life is like in America, for whatever reason, because you watch sitcoms or because you've watched a lot of videos about it or because you've read books about it or because you've met Americans, if you come in with a lot of expectations of this is what it's going to be like, your year ended up being worse than when you had no expectations, when you were just, you know what, I just want to see what happens. I'm hoping for the best, but I just want the experience. Those people had a much better year, a much better time. And honestly, we didn't have to really talk to them much throughout the years. But those that had, well, it's supposed to be, those are students we had issues with. We had to move them out of their houses, or we had to have conversations with them about their school and, expectations. And it was kind of a hard situation because basically it's like the story you were telling a while ago in one of our other videos about you had the two people who were getting a bonus and the one person expected the bonus and the other person didn't expect the bonus, and the one who did was disappointed because it wasn't as much, and the one who didn't expect the bonus was like thrilled because they got money from nowhere, even though the amount was exactly the
Yeah.
same. So
Yeah.
expectations of reality will affect your eternal happiness.
Yeah. And this is going back to the whole issue of AI, and we build our expectations off of what we see around us. If we think everybody else is doing fine because that's what appears on, the social media that we follow, then we're going to look at our own life, which is not doing fine, and think that, there's something wrong. It can generate anger, it can generate depression, but it's not going to be a good thing. And so when you look at AI, I side with the priests here because I'm not Catholic, but I've spoken, I've done sermons before in churches. And when I do, I don't do it very frequently, but when I do, it's something I pray about quite a bit. What am I going to talk about? And, uh, you know, that interaction is where I end up developing what I'm going to talk about. Well, I think that's coming from God. Now, if I'm just asking AI to whip out a sermon for me, where's the room for the Holy Spirit to come in and speak to me? I'm just following what the AI told me to do, and therefore I'm not following God. I'm following some artificial computer intelligence someplace
Yeah.
that doesn't even have consciousness as we understand it. So that I think the Pope is right that the idea that you would develop your homilies, which is the Catholic equivalent of a sermon, the fact that you would develop that using AI, yeah, I can see the temptation. Your life is busy, you got a lot going on, got to whip out a homily for this week, and it's just real tempting to push that button and have one generated for you that you can just read. But there's no room for human interaction or spiritual growth or anything like that. It's just a computer. And at which point, are we programming the computers or the computers programming us?
But you bring up an interesting point. There's always this talk about propaganda. And anytime anybody says the word propaganda, at least from my experience, it's always said in a negative way. Propaganda is bad. Propaganda is evil. It's used to brainwash people. And I think maybe by some sort of technical definition that I'm not all up on, that probably is correct. But I think everything in life is a way of using propaganda. Like we use our religion, we use our culture, we use our interactions. Everybody always talks, when they talk about culture, you have your written rules and you have your unwritten rules, right? And your written rules are things like don't steal and don't kill and don't jaywalk. But then you have the unwritten rules of, especially, it was a hard thing. So in California, you walk down the street and you don't look at your neighbors, you don't talk to your neighbors, you just kind of walk down your street and maybe nod, if you have to pass someone next to you. But you come out here in Wisconsin and there's this unwritten rule of you wave to people. Even if you don't know them, you're driving along the street and they're walking and you're waving. And so again, I feel like that is a type of propaganda, but I also don't think it's bad.
Yeah, what you said reminds me of a statement from Marcus Aurelius. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. And everything we see is a perspective, not reality.
And I think what we need as a human society to do is figure out what are the goods. And in AI, even there are good uses, right? I love the fact that I have AI to correct my grammar and spelling. I don't always use their suggestions, but I like the ability to see the different options and choose what voice that I want to use when I'm doing my writing. But using it for human interaction, the Google commercial where they were saying, how do I tell my friends I don't want to have dinner with them? Really? That's what you need AI for? I think those are things we need to learn for ourselves. We need to learn how to do human interactions. If you're in school and you have to write an opinion about something, an opinion about a book, an opinion about a movie, an opinion about a class, an opinion about whatever, having AI write your opinion, is it really an opinion then? So I think we need to draw lines to say, this is where we need to use our tools. This is where we can get our help. This is how we can have a good society. And then these are the bad things to do, and where we need to have that line in the sand, so to speak. So what do you think? Do you think that AI can be a real human interaction? Do you think it's useful in our lives, and what is reality? Is AI part of it? Or do we need to make sure that we're always cognitively aware that AI is artificial, just like an artificial flower? Tell us what you think in the comments. We do read your comments and we respond to many. And if you've made it this far in the video, please consider watching one of our other videos and supporting this channel on Patreon. Thank you for watching Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of ideas. And to our fellow adventurers, a special thank you for helping to support this channel.